Are you excited, Marcy? We are going to talk about dementia and inflation.
Oh.
If we can talk about payroll
To
accounting
my
and taxes
least.
next, then, after that,
And
I've
root canals.
scheduled us some voluntary root canals for this afternoon to make it special. But I was, did you know that it's Life Insurance Awareness Month?
I did not. Thank you for
That's-
making me aware of that.
That's part of the problem is that I became aware that it was Life Insurance Awareness Month
September is.
about September 9th. And I was like,
Come on, guys.
and I'm not that dialed into every aspect and every trade publication, but I still should have.
Yeah.
Maybe I was distracted.
That
Anyway,
inflation affects us all, and dementia affects millions of families.
yeah, Life Insurance Awareness Month. They started sending me articles, and they're like, these have been approved. Share with your people that you're talking to, your clients. And a lot of it was so basic. I was kind of making fun of it, but then
To folks like you and me.
I saw the one. It was like, how does mental cognitive decline affect inflation and retirement planning? For income strategy. I thought, ooh,
Yeah.
that is something that is hugely important because
Yeah.
people are living in, with cognitive decline, with dementia for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Before it really
And
shows
the
up.
cost, well, no, I'm saying that once they get into it, they require
okay.
that it's not, it used to be 2 or 3 years.
Right.
That was kind of what you expected. But they haven't cured the dementia or any of those issues, but they've made it where these where people are living a lot longer with these ailments,
Yeah.
which creates a really tricky retirement planning situation that we have some answers for.
All right.
But
Let's
right now
jump in.
we're gonna take a look at what some of what the problem is and,
Yeah.
and things that you need to be aware of and things you need to be discussing. Let's take a look. All right, so the fun topics of dementia and inflation. Now, inflation has obviously been getting all the press lately with what happened to fuel prices at the end of spring and the beginning of summer.
Yeah, I remember rejoicing when filling up my car just went back down to $60 instead of $80. I mean, it's ouch.
Definitely. And one thing I didn't realize when putting together some notes for this video, because one of the things that we focus on and that is a little bit contradictory to what the majority of the Wall Street, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe,
Yeah, talking heads.
those guys are promoting tax deferral. And one of the reasons they do that is like, wait and pay your taxes when you're not in your peak earning years. Well, that's great as long as you also get to say, okay, as long as we keep the taxes at the same rate. But one thing I didn't realize is that housing expenses and medical expenses, I assumed medical expenses was significantly
Right,
more.
for dementia.
Well, no, for once you're in retirement.
Oh, okay.
For over 65, you actually, you spend a lot more on medical costs than you do.
Right.
Medicare, that's kind of why Medicare exists. But even with Medicare, you're spending more on healthcare. But I was shocked to see that housing expenses go up during retirement also. You would think that your house is paid off, whatever the situation may be.
Right.
But this is an area where your typical cost of living adjustment for Social Security, because the price of a loaf of bread has gone up 2.6% over the past year. Look at what's going on in the housing market. We're getting outside investors putting price pressure on residential housing. It's the game is not in the favor of the individual, the person in the nursing home, the
Right.
retiree trying to live on a fixed income. So I think it is critical to make sure that you've got that wiggle room built into your retirement plan. Which brings up another issue. When you look at those guys, their standard way of planning is the 4% rule, and you're seeing more and more that the 4% rule is becoming the. I can count. I was trying to shut up. It's almost becoming the 2, but we're going to stop at 3 so far. So picture this: your mother suffering from dementia has the majority of her assets in,
A brokerage house.
E.F. Hutton, and they put that money in there they overfund, they max funded her IRA, whatever the situation may be, they had a target to hit a certain amount of money, and they're thinking, okay, once you hit retirement, you can live off 4% of that.
Right.
So I'm going to just rag on that way of planning a little bit. If you save $2 million, you can live on $80,000 a year before taxes.
Wow.
So that means you've saved up $2 million. You might get about $5,000 a month in income off of that. And even with that, there's a pretty good chance you could run out of income during your retirement. There are better ways. Let us put together a plan for you. Schedule your strategy session. I'm going to go back and talk about this.
So you said you found this in an article. Where
a lot of this information was gathered by surveys from, and we'll get into some of the stats in just a second, by Allianz, one of the largest companies in the world. And I think some of it was done in conjunction with the Alliance for Retirement Income, or the Alliance for Lifetime Income, which some of you might be familiar with. They've got a pretty good presence out there. Elton John is their
spokesperson.
Well, not their spokesperson, but that's their big event, is the Elton John tour. They're sponsoring it, and they did the Stones a couple of years ago until I think Mick got sick or something.
Right.
Rest in peace, Charlie. Anyway, so let's go back to your mother is in an assisted living facility, living off 4% of, let's say it's that $2 million. Unfortunately, that $2 million is not producing enough income after taxes to pay the bill at the average assisted living facility. If you'd like to see what the average cost is in your state, send us a message or leave a comment. We have a calculator that allows you to put in your zip code, and you can determine what you're looking at. It's terrifying. It really is. It's so expensive.
But this is so important. It's so unpleasant to talk about, but so important.
But the way of planning, where you just put all your money into this 60-40 split, which is the conservative, their touchstone, their the conservative money. Oh, the old 60-40 stock bond split. That's what you're going to want.
Yeah.
It's down about 19% year to date. So their myths about diversifying and getting diversification between stocks and bonds is false, because there's so much correlation between those two asset classes. Once again, back, your mother's in an assisted living facility. She's trying to live off of 4%. And then all of a sudden with inflation, for whatever expenses she might have, she needs more than 4%.
Yeah.
She's not in a situation to look at the overall risk tolerances of her portfolio. So do you have power of attorney? Does a trust department, which, if you go with the trust department that has the power of attorney over, somebody that is in dementia or suffering from dementia, you better make sure you trust those people. I've worked with a number of bankers and CPAs and throughout the years that, some of the horror stories I've heard and some of the horror stories I've witnessed is just, there are better ways to do it. So let's look at some of the data. 50% of all Americans are worried that inflation will make their basic retirement expenses unaffordable. 57%. So think about that. 57%. Over half of people are worried that their basic retirement expenses, not can I play golf at the private club on Wednesdays.
Right, or
it's,
take the family
can
on
I
vacation.
pay my rent?
Yeah.
Can I pay my electricity? We when the power grid in Texas went down last year, we saw just how vulnerable so many Americans are. So inflation is obviously a big concern, but when you throw in the fact that the person who's going to be most affected by this may not be in the best situation and may be also very vulnerable to being taken advantage of.
Right. And doesn't have the mental capacity to make these decisions.
That's what I'm saying. It brings up the need for some very careful planning
ahead of time.
And also, it shows you how some of these volatile assets like ETFs and stock funds and bond funds that have lost so much this year.
And crypto.
I doubt a lot of people have some probably do, but
Yeah.
anyway, just they're too risky for these types of planning situations.
Yeah, you don't want to act all Las Vegas with your family's financial future, especially when it comes to unforeseen medical expenses.
Unless you're ready to go hit GoFundMe and apply
Yeah.
for Medicaid
Yeah.
when mom runs out of money. So
Yeah.
this kind of goes hand in hand with that previous stat. Even a few more they believe that the rising cost of living or inflation will prevent them from enjoying their retirement.
So that's even more than the last one, just a little
And
bit.
it's
the
sadder.
59. Yeah.
Well, I guess I don't know. It's if you can't meet your basic living expenses,
Yeah,
you're probably
it's
not
gonna
going
keep
to
you, but
enjoy
still.
retirement very much. So
Yeah.
it is important to deal with these things ahead of time and make sure that you've got choices. And one of the ways you have choices is by having tax diversification, because if that risk is that the morons in Congress have raised taxes once again, you need to have options. You need to have tools that you can use without creating a taxable event. This one caught me off guard because it says less than a quarter of Americans are discussing, and I thought there's no way that 76% of Americans are just, and I'm like, oh no, it's saying the opposite.
Yeah.
More than 76% of people are not discussing.
Not, yeah.
So
They're saying this backwards.
and I bet you they're really, it's hard enough to sit and say, okay, mom's going into an assisted living facility. It's going to cost $7,000 a month. We set this amount aside. She's got her Social Security coming in. Where's the rest going to come from?
Right.
And then if you look at just the basic cost of inflation for everything else, you need to have some wiggle room in your plan. You need to have that core, like we do with the SAGE method. We get that base set up so that you've got this bucket of tax-free money that you can access at any time without having to worry where the market is, without having to worry about what it's, did I make too much money this year?
Yeah.
I'm going to have too much in taxes. Have taxes gone up because of the idiots in Washington? You need diversification between asset classes, including tax diversification.
This slide has reminded me back when we had our radio show for 12 years and we had psychologists on to talk about the psychology of money. Most of us, our families didn't really talk about money growing up. We don't like talking about hard things. So it's sort of our protective nature to kind of be an ostrich and stick our head in the sand. We don't even want to talk about it amongst our family. We really don't want to go to a financial professional and say, we're a train wreck.
Well,
what are we going to do about mom, dad?
It's not fun to sit there and look and say, oh, wait, this place, which, nobody wants to go in reality,
right.
is costing us $87,000 a year, and it's going up.
Right.
Did we plan for this?
Right.
And there are ways to do this so that you're not paying a dollar for a dollar when you do have these expenses occur. You can spread that risk to other entities. So what can you do?
All right. Making the connection between a longer retirement, the rising cost of living, and cognitive decline is the very first step in addressing inflation in retirement. So yeah, so
that's a mouthful, but if you think about it, this is kind of the key. One, we all know that people are living longer. They are spending longer time in assisted living facilities, nursing homes, residential assisted livings. Those are not 1 and 2 year propositions like they were 10 years ago.
Right.
The rising cost of living, we've seen it, especially in the housing market, because what if they're not in an assisted living facility and they're in their own house with, what did the cost of electricity do to them last year? And, so.
Because isn't it more like 5 to 10 years that people are living in retirement communities, memory loss units? I mean, it's long. It's long.
I haven't seen statistics on what the averages are, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's
For mine, it's more anecdotal, talking to friends, just, having to deal with this with their.
well, my
their,
mom's been
their
in the
parents.
facility for 5 years.
Yeah, over 5.
I mean, do the math.
yeah, it's rough.
And so it is important to make these connections and say, okay, we know that we've got it where mom can get $6,200 a month out of these 3 different buckets that we've set up, after taxes or whatever. But do you have that wiggle room?
Right.
Are there options so that you're not forced to make hard choices? I've completely bummed myself out.
It's true, but it is so important to talk about this because it doesn't
letting it
magically
sneak up
go
and hit you
away.
on the head is 1,000 times worse than
ostrich in the sand. I mean, you have seen this over and over and over the past 30 years with clients and trying to help people. So
well, and the number of people
hard.
who are dealing with health issues, housing cost issues, insurance issues that are 85 years old,
it's huge.
it's huge, especially compared to what we were working with 10, 15, 20 years ago. So planning has changed. Make sure that your plan is kept up. Let us do it for you. I know a lot of these things can be daunting. Set up your strategy session. Visit with me. We will do it for you. And then have a Zoom call. We'll get the experts on the phone with you. Walk you through what some of your options are, what some of your concerns are, and make sure that you're protected and the people you care about are protected so that you can enjoy your retirement. Have a great one.